son, where'd you find this?
Buckle up, buttercups. It's time to get down to business. Oh, yeah. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Totally legit.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are again. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Today, we've got an extra special guest. We've got historian, author, and educator, and keeper of the hidden histories of Long Island, Mr. Christopher Verga. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, just a quick little bit of context for my listeners. I'm working on some content for Long Island, and in the process of researching that, there isn't a ton of people who are knowledgeable on the particular subjects that I'm trying to research, but you are one of them. So I guess I'd love to start the conversation with what was the thing that made you start looking into the histories of Long Island? And we can, get into all the books that you've authored about all the different topics that relate to kind of topics that maybe Long Island doesn't necessarily want to talk about all the time.
Sure. So it's the most underrated history. That's number one. Foremost, and it's in my backyard. You always hear like urban legends about it, like the Montauk Project, or better yet, Stranger Things came out with a TV show about Camp Hero and all this other stuff. So it's always been in the back mind. And then I started teaching in Suffolk Community College. And a lot of my students kept coming up to me with total urban legends that were off the wall. And I'm like, something? Let me start entertaining them. Why not?
Yeah, right.
This is how I got into the Cold War, World War II section, because I've always been into Long Island history about civil rights, because that's kind of my domain, civil rights, World War II on a national scale. Because, once again, black returned soldiers equals they want demand for civil rights. So they correlate.
Sure.
But the World War II part with the aviation and all these crazy experimental stuff, it was usually my students coming up with these crazy thing. So I'm like, something, why not? Let me look into it. Let me see where they're coming from on this. Maybe it's on a Reddit or whatever. And it wasn't. It was actually the National Archives, which made it even more crazier. And then it became like, a slippery slope from there. It just went right down the rabbit hole. Then I got to another rabbit hole. And then it's like, wow, this is a book. Better yet, this is 2 books, maybe 4, maybe 5. But let me tell you, you don't have to make up crazy conspiracy theories about Long Island history, especially in the aviation and the air defense industry, because the reality is probably crazier than the conspiracy theories.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested to know, like, were there any stories that you came across that melted your mind in a special way? Like, a lot of this stuff is easily accessible history. It's just not necessarily, prominent history. You can find it if you go looking for it. But were there any stories that you came across that you were just like, I was not expecting this at all?
Let's see. We have how much time we have, right? Well, let's go in chronological order. First, there's the Nazi spy rings during World War II, and how like the Nazis were trying so hard in our defense industry to get like this, our bomb sites. And a lot of these spy rings were on Long Island, which came from Camp Siegfried. And they also created even a Nazi fascist movement here to try to get people in favor and sway more people to join this spy ring.
The cause, yeah.
That was insane. I didn't realize how deep the spy ring went. I have another book coming out in probably April that details this more about the spy rings and the fascist movement on when they tried getting regular people involved in it through fake media and all this other stuff and conspiracy theories. But they were really targeting people that worked in Grumman's or Republic Aviation. So that definitely blew my mind. The other thing is, let's go fast forward, due to time here, about the Cold War. Just Cold War period. That's all I need to say on that.
Right.
You got Plum Island, which is crazy. You got a Nazi war criminal that they brought him over through Operation Paperclip to literally start a freaking biological warfare program off the shore of Long Island. That is up there with top of the cake. And then, of course, you can't forget Brookhaven Labs. And Brookhaven Labs, some of the stuff there was just reckless. I don't know about crazy conspiracy stuff, but reckless, like just plain stupid. Like the Gamma Forest. throwing radiation in 150 acres of woods to see what happens to the trees. I don't know, maybe they're waiting for Hulk to come out or something.
Yeah, right.
But the problem is, I can tell you what happens. That's our water table. So we have kind of like the largest, that's called the cancer belt now, because soft tissue cancer is prominent in those surrounding areas like Shirley, Mastic, Manorville, and I think Shoreham or Rocky Point, one of those two areas. I get those two areas mixed up. They're right next to each other. If you know the demographics and the geography, everything's these little small towns, and they're all boxed together.
Yeah.
But just Brookhaven Labs in general was freaking crazy with the reactors and everything. And also, the fun history, of course, with Grumman's and Republic, like in the engineering of these planes. If you can imagine it, they will do it. So, just a little synopsis there.
I have always been interested in aviation history. And again, when we were doing our pre-call, I generally consider myself knowledgeable on these subjects, but I had absolutely no idea that Long Island was so pivotal, not only in our success in World War II in the sky, but just in aviation as a whole. Yeah. And, even the argument that some people make that maybe somebody on Long Island was actually first in flight as opposed to the Wright brothers. And when you look at the history of aviation, the known history of aviation, it actually doesn't seem too implausible. It actually makes a lot of sense. You have a lot of rich industrialists who are investing in these companies. They're also the people that have the money to buy airplanes and recreationally fly. It's not a coincidence that all the big airline companies, like a lot of them, started on Long Island. And, really, I feel like, again, Long Island contributed greatly to our air supremacy during World War II.
Yeah. No,
at least in just the production,
Oh, yeah, hands down, like Republic with the P-47 Thunderbolts. The only thing to beat the P-47 Thunderbolt in the sky on speed and anything was the Mustang. And that was a Grumman's-made plane to begin with. And Grumman's, hey, we're the birth of Grumman's. I will say, unfortunately, they did outsource the majority of that plane to Texas, I believe Lubbock area. But once again, the Red Tail, it's a great plane. Subjectively speaking, the P-47 was the one that really won us the war. Because they mass produced them like hell. You're talking 15,000 of them, and 9,600 of them were made right here on Long Island. The P-47 was one of the first planes with self-sealing gas tanks. Wow. And they were durable. Let's look at what we had before. Was it the Brewster Buffalo? Look, history's really friendly on that plane, but I joke around. I'm like, it flies like a buffalo. It's not a P-47 Thunderbolt. That the P-47 Thunderbolt, by hands down, you have flying aces like Gabby Gabrinsky. That guy was a beast in the air. He flew that plane. That was the Tuskegee Airmen's second plane before they got the updated version of the quote unquote Red Tails for the escort missions for bombers. But even the Avenger was made here. That was a beautiful bomber. I'm sure you heard the stories of George Bush Sr., the one that when he went down in a plane, it was the Avenger when he went over the Pacific. And that was made here on Long Island, too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And, you still got the relics of it. It's just that people forget this stuff. It's like, oh, look, why is this local baseball team called the Thunderbolts? Oh, because they hit the ball really far. No, it's the freaking plane aviation industry. It's in Farmingdale. So... we're really surrounded by it. But World War II, even the bomb sites that were made by Sperry's, you had the Sperry's Garden City and Lake Success. Once again, where would we be with World War II without bomb sites? That made us really accurate on the precision bombing. So that gave us the advantage in the war. Just think if we led that war as a full ground war, what would have happened? It would have been worse on casualties. So yeah, sure. Long Island is the hub of the arsenal of democracy. I know the arsenal of democracy is kind of like resigned for Detroit area. That's great. They made tanks. Awesome. They made a couple of bombers for Boeing. Awesome. But guess what? All that stuff, that innovation, those ideas came out of here. Even the buzz bomb came out of Republic Aviation as well. And, okay, well, it's a counterfeit bomb. Let's put it that way. But, hey, it got us to where we got to go. The buzz bomb sure. was a rebuttal to the V-1 rockets that the Nazis had. So the ones that did not go off, the duds, which there was a lot of duds, because, when you're making slave labor, you don't really have the highest morale on your labor force. So, like, a lot of those buzz bombs, they were taken from England, from London specifically, and brought to Farmingdale Republic, where they dissected them. And it's like, okay, let's counterfeit one. And it became a buzz bomb we made, and we put a Ford motor in it. They call it a buzz bomb because when it comes closer, it makes that bzzz sound. But yeah, it was all right here, especially for World War II. Bombs, aviation mainly. We didn't make tanks. We don't get that claim. So it's mainly aviation. And plus, we also got Mitchell Field, which is one of the biggest military bases and outside one of the biggest urban centers. Mitchell Field, well, it's Garden City, Uniondale, right on the cusp right there. So we're testing a lot of this stuff as well. So,
I don't know if I can't remember if we had talked about this, but even like the Long Island Aviation Club, at the very beginning of aviation, gyroscopes. A lot of the early developments in the instruments that allow us to fly planes without visual, flying through clouds and flying at night. A lot of those things come out of the companies in Long Island. I think most people, I was this way. I figured most of the big developments in aerospace were in some bunker in the desert. Area 51, some place like super far removed, and learning that all of this stuff was happening an hour or two east of New York was just kind of mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
And, it does make sense. This was a population center. Obviously, this was an important area, but then once, you just start looking up and down the coast, the subs that are getting made in Boston, ultimately, when we bring over all of the Nazi rocket scientists, a lot of them get posted up in Boston, but that's not really even that far.
No.
So it's like, a lot of the production and development, research and development was happening in Long Island. And yeah, it might have been getting piped a couple hours north or south, but this really was the hub, and it still is. I think it's the one of the largest concentration of military contractors in the world, and I think up right now there's still 250 companies who are headquartered in Long Island.
Yeah, well, when we talk about incubators, I just want to unpack what you were saying for a minute. Long Island specifically is chosen for a reason. So let me digress for 1 second and pull it all together here for you.
Let's do it.
Yeah, remember Amazon 2? Remember Amazon 2 they were building years back? Okay, when they were building Amazon 2, Amazon headquarters 2, when they wanted to build it in New York City.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that.
What were they saying? It's like, we need innovation. That's the first thing he said. It's like, we need to be located near an airport. We need to be located near a transit line. And we need to be located by many, 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 many universities because we need an educated workforce. Long Island, you're located by many, 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 many universities. At the time, there was like 14 colleges on Long Island. Some closed that were smaller, some merged, et cetera, et cetera. And plus we did have those airstrips, and we did have the large urban center. So being located right here on Long Island specifically, it's because even today, when we look for innovation, we still have it, or we fill those domains, just like when they wanted to build Amazon 2. We have the educated workforce, we have the transit hubs, and we have the urban center. And that's a big reason. And yes, we do fly under the corridors of this, of course.
I mean, and now that you're saying that, it makes total sense. I kind of want to branch back to Brookhaven National Labs too. Speaking of having an educated workforce, even with the nuclear stuff, again, my understanding of that until very recently was that was occurring on Los Alamos property in the desert.
Yeah.
And the more I looked into it, the more I realized a lot of the research, at least the research portion of it, was occurring in businesses in Long Island. And even the first, Brookhaven had the first nuclear reactor built post-war. Mm-hmm. They were really driving deployable nuclear energy, and even the push to make Long Island a nuclear park. I was talking with Carl Grossman, who'll be on the show here. He'll soon be on the show to kind of go into a little bit more detail about it. But I had no idea that there was as much focus on nuclear stuff here. And my big question for you is, as I'm trying to make sense of this, at that time, at the end of World War II, nuclear stuff was the most heavily classified, and debatably it probably still is. It's probably the most classified sensitive stuff, rightfully so. And we know that we took a ton of Nazi scientists over here, like at least the numbers 1,600, 1,800, you know.
Somewhere in that name.
But we're only really accounting for publicly a few hundred of them, really. It's the Nazi rocket scientists that get the most of the praise because they were the most public. I can't help but think that there were probably a lot of the nuclear scientists, the people that were doing the nuclear research for Nazi Germany, that ended up over here. And the reason that there's a gap in the accounting for the rest of those guys is that they were working on the most sensitive stuff. And we may never get the declassification of that stuff because it's hyper secret. And I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
No, it definitely is. Like once again, when they declassify things, it pushes the bar on what we know, you know? So what I'm telling you now is what we know as of now. Is there more scientists brought over for the Operation Paperclip? I won't doubt it, you know? I will not doubt it at all. Sorry about the vague answer here, because
it is vague, you know, we just don't know.
Yeah, I don't. Like, I can only speak for what I know. But you know something, once a lot of those nuclear scientists that did come over to help us out, a lot of them were Jewish and they were academics and they were fleeing from Nazi Germany. So that was a huge component right there. Like Einstein, you know, he had his meeting in a house that birthed, a rental house, where that birthed essentially, you know, the concepts of a nuclear bomb. Right there in Orient Point, Nassau Point, Orient Point, a little specific area in the North Fork, really beautiful area. And, you know, after he got done writing it all up, he said, oh, yeah, this is a really, really, really dangerous bomb. Maybe we should not do this type thing. We just got to avoid Nazis from getting it. Well, we know how that worked out. Hell, we got enough firepower to end the world a couple of times over, probably. You know, we recreated the surface of the sun. Yeah. So, actually, I think we recreated the surface of the sun 3 times. A hydrogen bomb burns at 21,000 degrees. Correct me if I'm wrong. You know, the surface of the sun, 7,500, 7,000 degrees, somewhere in that range. So that's even scarier. But but even like when we got this horrible, destructive force to end the world, essentially, your doomsday device, we'll call it. Now we got to figure out a way to use it for a civilian market, and that's where we get Brookhaven Labs from. Once again, Carl is a bulldog when it comes to journalism, and when it comes to Brookhaven Labs, I don't want to take much away from him on this. But let me tell you, it was a very dumb idea on a lot of things. Like even if you look at the scientist, life expectancy of the scientist, they would send them in there to go play reactors with just freaking mittens on. You know, it's like, wow. It's like, well, why are these scientists dying after 3 years? I don't know. Ooh, must be the cigarettes. It probably was, but the radiation wasn't helping either.
Maybe a portion, but I'm sure the radiation had a big effect on it. Yeah,
exactly. They were doing everything but rolling around in it at this point. Like life expectancy for scientists there was very, very short. But, you know, with all that, you also have the high flux beam reactor, which was constructed in 1965. Sorry about that. I think that was a test for one of the nuclear parks, and I believe that was a graphite reactor. I'm not sure. But, you know, that thing leaked. It leaked tritium for like almost 20 freaking years, you know? And like, you know, this is not really responsible behavior, you know? You know, this started in 1947 at the end of World War II for a lot of this research. And, you know, we even we had a scientist go over there to see what impact radiation has on the Renapol people as well after we dropped all these bombs in the Pacific. And, you know, it's just horrible, you know, because I'm at a point, I don't think we need nuclear reactors. You know, we have such a wide selection here. It's great history to talk about, you know, scary history to talk about, actually, you know.
Well, you bring up a good point. It's the reckless nature, and look, I'm a futurist. I'm always going to be for advancing technology.
Oh, me too.
Even if it's somewhat dangerous, but for me, what I can't reconcile is why do this so close to New York City. Why do this so close to basically every major city on the eastern seaboard?
right next to our water table too.
It's crazy. It's just like if you want to do that in the desert where it's but you know, people are somewhat isolated from it. I'm again all for that, but you know, as you were saying before, it was probably just the convenience of being close to the universities, and people didn't have to uproot their whole family and move out into the middle of the desert. And, the general sentiment once we discovered nuclear energy was, let's make everything nuclear. And some of the ideas were great, but a lot of them weren't. And a lot of them, the people who are in the surrounding areas suffered the consequences of that very bold and reckless advancement of science.
Yeah. And once again, they did come up with the concept of, chemotherapy out there, the microwave, hell, I microwaved my breakfast this morning, but when we talk about nuclear radioactive, I'm a futurist as well. I believe in progress. I believe in technology. Maybe not so much with this older computer, but I really do believe in it. But that being said, I think we had enough trial and errors to realize that I don't think there's a safe way of getting through reactors at this point. I think with all our advancements, we can come up with something better. I just hold us at a higher bar at this point. You got so many oopses that we had on so many levels. How many more oopses, it's going to be like an X-Men comic, we're all going to have our own mutations,
Well, I even the tritium leak under Brookhaven is one thing. The other thing that was blowing my mind is all the radioactive compounds below Grumman, and even there's like the tangential story of that guy with the Long Island UFO network who was trying to poison the politicians, and his buddy who worked at Grumman was easily able to acquire 3 to 5 cans of radium. And it's like just thinking that stuff. And now radium's a little more prosaic in terms of nuclear stuff. Radium was getting used in all sorts of means of production, so that's not that crazy. But in the plume below Grumman, there's a whole bunch of other compounds that shouldn't necessarily be there.
So I will say that those compounds there, I'm not sticking up for Grummans. They were reckless, of course, but it wasn't on purpose either. You got something you have something called these dry wells, and they don't really expect them as much as they should. So they put all the chemicals in a dry well, and idealistically, we pick it up so it doesn't get contaminated in the area, dispose of them properly, et cetera, et cetera. Bethpage Grumman's been there for a very long time. Those dry wells have a short shelf life, and that's what created the plume. The crack in the dry well went into the groundwater. And once again, when you're in Suffolk and Nassau County, we don't get the aquifer system that New York City gets. Everything's groundwater. Essentially what you put in the ground, and if it doesn't get filtered out, you turn your tap on, it's right there to say hi, But that's why we have a lot of these problems. But Grumman's, that was not intentional. And they were a little reckless about a lot of where their stuff went. I will put it that way. So I was going to an estate sale. When I write these books, I like to get soldiers' perspectives. I was going to an estate sale, and I was talking to another, I guess he was an antique dealer. He was telling me about how, he's like, I got Grumman stuff, and I'm interested because I want all that. And he was telling me about how he spoke to this couple, and, this guy has claymores and stuff in his house and all this other stuff, and it made by Grummans, and, they're trying to sell it to him. And he's like, what am I going to do with it, but the thing is, he was a Grumman's worker, and he was able to obtain them, and he took them home as souvenirs, which is little scary, and like a bunch of other things, like components for a Raytheon missile. It's like, wow, I don't know what you're going to do with that. Maybe put it on my wall. I don't know, but Raytheon missile is not made in Grumman's, but a lot of their components are. So this is a little crazy. So but but the thing is, if you want anything as antique aviation for Cold War, it's so cheap on Long Island, and it's great to treasure hunt for that, especially for anything related to the F-14. Which is which is not too far from Brookhaven Labs. Essentially, it's right there in Calverton. And that thing was a beast when you think about it. The F-14, that was definitely innovative for its time. So I think it's the first plane with a microprocessor.
Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, well, and that it's still like one of the most iconic planes in the U.S.'s arsenal.
Yeah.
That's saying something. Considering all the new stuff we have, that's saying something.
Well, it says something when you got the my personal favorite for Cold War. It's the A-10 Warthog, Republic.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. They still use that now. That is a beast. It's
that on the battlefield, soldiers hope that plane shows up.
That's a fact.
That plane can take insane amounts of large and small arm fire. the gun, GE makes the gun on the front.
Yeah.
That sound is iconic. When soldiers are pressed on the field and they hear that sound, it's like a wave of relief. It's like a known thing in the military on the battlefield. You want the A-12 to show up.
But just think about this for a second. Just think about designing this thing. You had an engineer essentially say, we got this awesome gun. Let's build a plane around this awesome gun. They didn't say, let's build a plane with a gun on it. Like, this is like, yo, we got this cool gun. Well, what are you going to do? Build a plane around it. That's essentially what it is. It's a flying fucking gun. Excuse the language.
That's amazing.
But yeah, it is amazing. It's crazy. Like, this is the stuff coming out of, Fairchild Republic at the time. Once again, Fairchild's another aviation industry here. They merged, but with Republic. But that's Farmingdale. That was birthed there.
Yeah.
F-14's great. The Hawkeye's great. Thing with the big disc on it. We still use that. F-14, and we kind of seen better days with it. So it's pretty much out now. It's gone. We have it there still in reserves, I think. But, unfortunately, Iran has a lot of them too. Which is the thing. Yeah. But we got so many things that could tear those things apart now. But it started with that. It was that, and then it led to something else. It's like a step, going up.
I'm also interested, the more I've been reading into this, and we had talked about this kind of at the beginning, the known Nazi spy rings that existed in Long Island. But the more I looked into the intelligence perspective, I don't know if you're familiar with the Culper spy ring, Washington's first spy ring.
Yep.
That's supposedly the first spy ring in American history, and its operatives were never unmasked, and there are definitely a few key players in the formation of the big intelligence community that emerges post-World War II that were in Long Island. William Casey, too, former director of the CIA, was out there. I'm interested in what other stuff you've come across, not just with the Nazi anti-American spying, but like the actual history of American intelligence on Long Island.
Wow. Everyone's spying on somebody here.
Well, and it makes sense. Like, there's so much sensitive stuff occurring in Long Island. During the Cold War, it's the Russians. They had to be here because this is where the stuff that was being used against them was being developed. They had to be here and spying.
No, that's a fact.
The same thing with the Nazis. This is where they were producing all the crazy research that was getting deployed against the Nazis was being developed here.
Well, of course, like you said before about the aviation, when we're talking about Spies, when we talk about the bomb sites and even autopilot, that's the first thing they wanted. They wanted that for the Luftwaffe, Yeah. And they actually had spies infiltrate Spies in Garden City. This guy wrote him, and he gave him everything for $3,400. He was their top engineer. And that's where the Nazis essentially perfected autopilot from us because we had a bad leak. But when we talk about spies, Culper spy ring by far is one of the first. We tried a little bit on a couple of things like Nathan Hale. I'm sure we heard, Nathan Hale. I got one life to live, and it's from my country. He never said that. He said, "May I have a priest?" And they said no, and they hung him. But I think it's great that we do make him a martyr, though. I'm not trying to take that away. But once again, we perfected Invisible Ink here and all this other stuff during the Culper spy ring. And if you want to know, digressing, you want to know a fantastic book, Bill Blyer, Culper spy ring, awesome book. And another book you should check out, Remember Liz, The Remarkable True Story of Liz, by Claire Bijaro. She talks about how one of the agents was a former enslaved African woman for the Culper spy ring. And she has she has a fantastic argument in that. And, this spy network essentially went from Francis Tavern. Okay, now, I'm sure some people disagree, but this is what I understand on all the paperwork. Francis Tavern in New York City, which is still there, and you can still get alcohol there for a crazy price. Wouldn't go there for happy hour specials. I don't think they have them.
It's a Wall Street building now for sure.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to spend $50 a shot, have fun. And I think that's a cheap one. That might be Evan Williams shots.
That's the budget. Yeah, the budget.
Yeah. But going back to this, though, you're going from Francis Tavern in Manhattan, where all the British soldiers used to get tanked at, and going all the way to the Hempstead Plains, all the way to Setauket, and then it's going to General Talmadge in Connecticut, who's kind of the founder of this spy ring for the Patriots. That's the first, Visible Ink, the spy networks, all that. And then let's move forward. These spy networks are only going to get better and better. And World War II is when we're really going to test it with German-American Bund. We're going to do crazy conspiracy theories to hook more people. And, I love Long Island, I do, and I'm really proud of where I'm at and where I live. And I love teaching, I love writing it, but it made us really receptible for Nazi spy rings, because prior to the Nazi spy rings, we had 1 in 7 people on Long Island that were Klan members. So this was this was prime for like a Nazi ideology. So that was another reason why it was selected. And then you got all the aviation plans. So, you're mixing everyone's hate. They're crackpot conspiracies, and you're giving it to Nazis. And we're also going to get Eric Traub. I think we described him before. He's the Nazi war criminal that created Plum Island. He is going to graduate from veterinary science program from the Rockefeller Institute, and he's recruited at Camp Siegfried in Yaphank to go work for Heimlich Himmler to weaponize diseases for the Nazis.
That was at Reams Island, right?
Reams Island, that is correct. Yeah. Yes. And he's recruited right there in Camp Siegfried. And he's going to go for Camp Siegfried. And, he was so good at what he did, we gave him a job instead of hanging him, So, hang them a higher than they said. But let's fast forward. Then we got the Cold War. And then the Soviets, hey, they want a new F-14 because they don't have one. Those MiGs suck in comparison. So they're going to do everything they can. And they're even going to literally put spies within suburbia to spy on regular suburbans to make the perfect spy. It gets crazy. When you talk about the Rosenbergs, Ethel and Julius, those drop-off stations that they allegedly were doing, which they were innocent, years later we find out, unfortunately, those drop-off stations were in Glen Cove, for intel. That's people forget this, it's in freaking Glen Cove train station, and that was a big drop-off for a Soviet spy network because of the Soviet compound, and Killenworth is right there.
Yeah,
so
I was just going to say, that makes total sense because Killenworth was right there.
Yeah, but that's operating in plain freaking sight. You kind of expect it to be there, right? Out of convenience. It's wow. But yeah, the spy rings are insane, and I can't get enough of that. I love that stuff. Actually, the next project I want to do is maybe a Soviet spy ring book. Because I just got done with the Nazi one. It's unbelievable. It really is. It's insane. So,
well, as I was looking into that, I love the history of spy technology, intelligence, and I just had no idea that Glen Cove, Roslyn were so involved in that. And even there's a bunch of really interesting Masonic lore. I'm a Mason. I'm super into Masonic history. Francois Tavern was one of the first places I ever went to when I moved to the city. They have the old charters, the Order of the Odd Fellows, which is kind of like a sister organization to Masonry. That was intelligence before they developed American intelligence. That's how they kept those secrets and were able to transpire those messages. But even Roslyn, there's a whole portion of Masonic lore that's associated with Roslyn, Scotland, and they renamed that town Roslyn for that reason. That's also where William Casey's house was, I'm pretty sure, in Glen Cove, Roslyn area.
Yeah, Roslyn. Yeah.
And I was also looking into this. There's this tower in downtown Roslyn. If you're standing by the tower, the clock tower in downtown Roslyn, there's another tower that's right behind it. And it's this thing called a long lines tower. And a long lines was a system that AT&T devised that was for military and civilian purposes.
Yes.
But it was military, and it was one of the first microwave, securable forms of communication, and that stretched all of Long Island. And the apex in New York is the AT&T building that has no windows. It's actually down by where I work in the city. That building can take a nuclear blast, and all of those towers were designed to survive a nuclear attack, and if one went down, be able to automatically reroute the signal to keep secured lines of government communication.
I will say this though: those towers, the Russians figured it out too. I don't know if I put that in the Cold War book. They found a way to tap into some of the intel that was coming off those towers in Brookville, in their Brookville compound, and they specifically chose these compounds because it was along the corridors of those towers. So yeah, it's it's great. It was great innovation, but for every idea we get, you're going to get someone to try to counterfeit it and tap into it. But But what drives me nuts is we were so vulnerable, like we come up with these great innovation, then we get cocky about it, and then we lose it, and that's a big problem when it talks about innovation here. Like look, autopilot, the bomb sites. What do? We get cocky, and all of a sudden it goes to the Nazis. Those towers that we're talking about right there. Russians like, let's build a compound right here in the crossroads of it. We'll get a great deal.
Siphon off that data, yeah.
Siphon off that data, and we want a brand new F-14, or Hawkeye or whatever. It's seriously, But that's the problem with our story here. That's one of the biggest problems. We rise and then we freaking fall hard because we get cocky. We see we don't see the whole picture. And that's the problem. Those towers were not in. They were able to tap into it for spy network, I think when they raided the Brookville compound, the equipment they found there was insane, that tapped into those.
And I even with Killenworth too, which they didn't even disband until like 2017. It was like super recently.
Oh, yeah.
They even then they were like, this is some of the most advanced electronic spying equipment.
Yeah.
And it was just on the third floor of a mansion in Long Island.
Yeah.
Tapping off how many decades of sensitive information.
Exactly. And, you talk about WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks, is that what it's called? With Julian Assange and stuff?
Yeah.
We are our own worst enemy with that,
Yeah.
Like, I think when we come up with these ideas, we got to formulate the bigger picture here, because, eventually we did catch a lot of people. There's a guy, Thompson, in Bayshore. Like when he went down, it opened up a whole wave of like Russian spies being caught. But yeah, it was like, it's insane on how much they know. They know more than you think. So.
Well, and it's 30,000 people are employed by these companies. Statistically, one of those people is in financial hardship.
Yes.
And that's all it takes. The Soviets can just be like, look, we'll give you a lot of money. You'll never have to worry about money again. You just need to give us those secrets. And you have somebody's back up against the wall. Most people are going to at least entertain the idea. I don't know if this was the Thompson guy, but there was that one guy who had a 50-foot shortwave radio tower in his backyard. That's the guy.
That's his little
mind-blowing.
Oh my God! First of all, how the hell did you go that freaking long with a damn radio tower in the backyard without a freaking?
And nobody said anything. Yeah, right.
I live in Bayshore. Okay, like if I put an extension of my house there after me, seriously.
Yeah, right. Permits.
What permits? Like, did you have a permit for that tower? Screw that. Did you have a permit? And like, he got caught because he used a racial slur against his neighbor. He called his neighbor the N-word, and his neighbor's like, yo, I think there's something going on here with this 50-foot tower. Like, that whole spy ring got unfolded because of an angry neighbor. Like,
love that.
That's the Long Island story, Like,
I love that.
Yeah, great. Like a racist neighbor getting back at him, and the neighbor's getting back at him, Like he said something racist, the neighbor gets back at him. That's the story of Long Island, That's why you got to be nice to your neighbors, even if you are a spy.
Yeah, well, right. That's part of the cover.
Seriously.
It's part of the cover is not giving anyone a reason to suspect you.
Exactly. And that was crazy. 50-foot tower, and then like he's downstairs speaking Russian, and everyone's like, oh, what's that funny language he's speaking at night in this little shortwave radio station? Like, what the hell?
It's so wild, the density of this stuff. And again, like this is, I'm sure as time goes by, we'll learn more as things are declassified.
I just want to jump in and interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
You're interviewing Carl Grossman. Ask Carl Grossman about that spy Thompson. No, ask about it. He has the best freaking story because he interviewed him for the paper. Oh my God.
No way. Are you serious?
Yeah, you got to hear that. You got to hear that. Carl got the craziest story for that. Seriously, Carl got the craziest story, and that shit is crazy. He's like, yeah, I walked in his house, and he's watching Spy vs. Spy. It was like a early 1960s TV show, and he's like, I never knew the irony on why he liked it so much when I was interviewing him.
I'm super excited for my call with him because when I just did the pre-call with him, he was putting me onto so many things that I just had no idea, especially with relation to the nuclear landscape and Catacasinos, Long Island Lighting Company.
Oh yeah.
He really is. He's kind of the master on all that.
He's the walking Smithsonian. Period.
It really is crazy. I've made my way through most of the videos on his the YouTube page for the TV station that he has. And a lot of really good content, a couple of really good documentaries that, again, just opened my eyes to the fact that I was even completely unaware we were messing around with nuclear satellites, like to power satellites out into deep space exploration. And then, of course, because of the Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars and stuff, he was just casually being like, oh, yeah, we did this and that, this and that.
Yeah. Well, Paul doesn't talk about this one. We actually I found this. Ford Motor Company wanted to make a nuclear reactor to power their cars.
No way.
Yeah, I could tell you so many problems with that. Seriously. You're driving, just, everyone talk about the Pinto blowing up on impact.
There's a whole different scale of destruction there.
You take out the whole Southern state in one fender bender.
And again, like, I'm for the development and the futurist and the application of these sciences, but some of the stuff, like I was reading stuff they were trying to make like nuclear toasters.
That's just nuts. Yeah,
it's crazy. It's just craziness, and
the toast eats you.
Yeah, no, seriously. I get it that this was new technology, and again, that's how these companies make money, is they develop stuff that they can sell it to us as the public or to the military for contracts, like big money contracts. But it just, at some point I've always been aware of the influence of the industry on the government and the machinations of the government. But I was unaware as to the true scope of, like, let's throw shit at the wall and see what sticks, but that shit is radioactive. Exactly.
And kill you, most likely. Yeah. I just want to put out there real quick. I was talking about this. I'm digressing for 1 second.
No worries.
Yeah, she wrote this great book, and it's a stark warning. I'm the worst self-promoter out there. I got a bunch of books, and I haven't mentioned one, but I will mention everyone else's I love. Welcome to Shirley, a memoir from an atomic town. Kelly McMasters wrote this book. This book is a fantastic book, and it tells you about the dangers about Brookhaven Labs and all the crazy experiments they had, and what led to essentially her whole town having like lymphoma and breast cancer. And once again, this is called the cancer belt, this area. So when you throw shit out the wall to see what sticks, it has consequences, real life consequences. And once again, I'm a futurist. I believe in progress with technology, but I don't see it with nuclear radiation, because we've been slapped in the face a lot on this one. How many times do you get slapped in the face? Like, I think we have so much more ideas we can come out with. We can create more incubators, more hub for innovation. Like, I'm pretty sure we can do many other things. But yeah, this is one of your best arguments on the dangers behind it. And once again, I'm sure you could talk to Carl, and he'll give you, he'll go on for hours about
the
this.
Nitty gritty. Yeah.
I don't want to take it away from him, because he's the expert. I'm secondary. So.
Well, you bring up a good point too, and I know you're kind of crunched for time too, so I want to make sure we at least get this in here. I want to go kind of over the books that you have. I will have the links to all of these
thank you.
In the podcast description, but kind of so people can get an idea of you're like one of the only people who's documenting this history for Long Island. There just aren't many people who, I guess, aren't interested in it or aren't close enough in proximity to be able to get the information. But definitely shout out all these books and I can't remember which one's the newest one, but I know you're working on a couple too.
Ferguson Brothers Lynching's the newest one, yeah. So I'll go in order here. The one coming out in April is Nazis of Long Island, Sedition, Espionage, and the Plot Against America. That comes out in April. That book is amazing. I put a lot of time into it, and I assure you, the stuff I have in there will be a mind blower. The other book is the Ferguson Brothers Lynching. That book right there. Yep, that one. That book right there is pretty much about it's how we had the catalyst for the civil rights movement right here, and how the NAACP and how all these big civil rights organizations pick and chose who to use as a martyr for the civil rights movement. I don't want to give that one away. Newsday did a fantastic spread on that. And the other one is Cold War, Long Island, and that is the one related to your show. That one right there, I wrote it with Carl. Carl is a bulldog. If you love Carl's interview, you would love that book. If you love my interview, you'll love that book as well. Unfortunately, there's no Montauk project. I'm the spoiler alert for that. But after reading that book, you don't care about a Montauk project because there's more crazier things. The next one is World War II and the Home Front, Long Island. Another fantastic book. It talks about how World War II essentially built Long Island. And also built our aviation industry to become an innovation hub. Sorry about that. That one right there. Another one, I wrote it during COVID, so the editors were home. So you might have a couple of typos on that one, unfortunately. So that was bad timing. The final one is Saving Fire Island from Robert Moses. Every street, every main highway, thoroughfare, and park you can think of was created by this guy. He was insane. I'm not going to say he was innovative either. If you ever drove in the LIE, there's nothing innovative about that. It's funny because he designed all these roads that you can think of, and he never had a driver's license. And if you drive on these roads, it makes so much sense. Go drive on the Bruckner, and you'll understand. So that is Saving Fire Island from Robert Moses. So those are just some of my books. Thank you, by the way, for giving me that platform. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, please. Thank you again for coming on here and just laying the serious information down. And again, I'll have all of the links to these books in the description for this episode. The Montauk thing is so funny. Like that conspiracy is legendary, and I've seen a ton of stuff about it. And that's where I thought a lot of this was going to go when I started looking into it.
Yeah.
But you're completely right. There's enough. You don't even need to get into the fringe conspiracy portion of it. There's enough known strange history that just makes you every time I will find new bits of information. It's just like I need to stop reading to let it process in my mind because it hurts. Like I can't. I'm not able to reconcile how that is just actual real history and it's somehow crazier than the Montauk story or any of the lore around that.
That's a fact, because the Montauk story is light compared to everything else. Like Montauk, Camp Hero is amazing, like those giant anti-aircraft guns sticking out of a freaking cliff and disguised as a freaking fishing village. It has the trappings for an amazing story. But it's nothing in comparison, just west of Brookhaven Labs, Plum Island, Grumman's, Republic Aviation, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to definitely send you some pictures. I forgot to do that for the Cold War.
Brilliant! Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. I forgot about that. I do apologize. I'll definitely send you some.
No worries.
Yeah. Worries. But it's insane, some of the stuff we have. This was like Tony Stark and Iron Man case every day out here. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Even the Nike missile sites.
Oh yeah,
there's they're all over. They're all over Long Island.
Ask Carl about that because he did a great documentary on that. I would love to talk about those, but I don't want to take that away from Carl. Like seriously, Carl's a bulldog. The end. After your interview, that should be a big takeaway. He's a bulldog. So,
well, and he's one of the few. Like he's always been saying this, and there's a track record of him for at least 40 years being like, folks, they're doing some very strange stuff at our expense, and we need to be a little angrier about it. And I love that.
Yeah. You're getting cancer for a reason here. It's not coincidental.
It's not a coincidence.
Yeah. Carl Carl's a bulldog with that, especially the Nike missile sites. Like, we stopped them because New Jersey almost disappeared, essentially. There was a guy smoking, there was a fire, and it almost ended very bad. Let's put it that way. And like, I think the other one was the missile site in Amityville. We got really pissed off because the guy that worked there was trying to, he was having the Boy Scout troop ride the elevator with the nuclear missile for a photo op. I can tell you how bad that was. That was another reason, he wasn't supposed to do that. He said he was trying to take them out to parade them around for a parade for the Boy Scouts. That didn't really work. Oh, yeah.
Great idea.
Yeah, it's a fantastic idea. That's what I want coming down my block, a giant-ass missile, nuclear tip missile. And the whole idea about those missiles was you're going to blow a Russian formation out of the air, right?
Right.
And it's going to save New York City. But the problem is, what comes up must come down, right? Screw the airplane parts. It's going to rain nuclear radiation down on our ass.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, so they're short range. It was like the dumbest idea. Like, this ain't intercontinental ballistic missiles. This is going up and down. This is coming right back to us. And again,
like these are ideas. I just did a really long episode with another podcast about DARPA. And all the crazy ideas that DARPA's come up with. Yeah. A lot of them originate at Brookhaven National Labs.
That is true.
Like the key players in DARPA were kind of being pulled from Brookhaven. They were coming up. They were literally charged with coming up with every possible option. It's like Dr. Strangelove shit.
It is.
And, again,
it is.
They were willing. They were willing to let nuclear radiation rain down on us if it meant, blowing up the Soviet.
It is.
Fleet, whatever.
Yeah. It's a fantastic idea as long as we can get the Soviet fleet go bye-bye,
Yeah.
I will say this about DARPA, though. DARPA is like, for every crackpot idea that almost killed us, they have a lot of ideas that did come out that really improved our quality of life,
Sure.
I'm happy the crackpot ones never freaking came to fruition, though. But DARPA, by far, when they say, this is controversial, but when people say let's cut the military, you got to realize we're cutting innovation. And that's pretty much our biggest export in this country. GPS, AI, that's all DARPA, DARPA all the way. So,
Internet.
I forgot about that one. Where we could be at with that internet. Yeah. That's
not all of that stuff is bad. And I even during that episode, it was like we were finding the articles from early 2000s or 2014, and they were already talking about like nanotech. And this is stuff that was, it was a part of the public vernacular, but you'd have to really go looking for it.
Exactly.
There's a lot of advances in medical science that come out of the research and stuff that they do at DARPA.
Yeah. And like, once again, you gotta be careful when we can't do knee-jerk reactions, if you want to cut DARPA to try to make a smallpox bomb, that's a great idea, but you got to remember all the good stuff that came out of it, So it's not a zero-game sum, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I know the military-industrial complex, people complain about it. Look, we are what we are. This is just what it is. Like, we're innovative. This is where you get the money to come up with that innovation, So... like there are some things. I'm actually sending you right now a couple of cool pictures with Fort Tilden's nuclear silo. It's going to be sent to a Google Drive if that's okay. That's
totally fine. Yep, that
works.
Okay,
cool. Yeah, this should be great. Yeah, this was great. If you have any other questions or follow-up interviews, hey, I'm more than happy to come on your show again when my next book comes out.
I was going to say, let's just go ahead and plan on that. Once the next book comes out, add me to the list of press for that, because I'd love to kind of hear you unpack the stuff that you can't necessarily talk about now.
Yeah.
And just continue this subject, because as I'm learning, there's endless rabbit holes. And endless rabbit holes and connections. Even as I was learning all this stuff and telling my parents about it, my parents will entertain my my obsessive nature of like learning about these things. But my mom was like, "Oh yeah, your great uncle, he worked for Bell Labs. He worked radio and radar stuff for Bell Labs."
Wow.
Oh yeah, there was a period of time where he was out at the Kwajalein Islands, and Kwajaleins are like some of the most
remote.
Yeah, and they're remote because they're doing some of the most exotic stuff out there. It's just funny to I've known who he was my whole life, but I had no idea that he was involved in. I mean, literally, she was sending me pictures of certificates that he got from the psychological warfare department of the Army and all these. I had no idea that this guy who I spent my summers at his house in North Carolina, he was involved in some of the most cutting edge stuff of the time. But it
is amazing. And it's crazy when you speak to that generation of people, what drives me nuts as a historian, when you're speaking to all of these people, right? They're all like, well, it's a matter of fact, it's like, yo, seriously, yo, that's insane, that stuff you did. They're like, it's what it is. Even when you talk to Carl,
we were just doing it.
Yeah, it's just like, I was just hanging out and I found a nuclear tip missile. It's like, what the fuck? It's like, it's just like, whatever, but the thing is, you got to pull it out when you're interviewing these people, and it drives you nuts as a historian, especially World War II. I'm interviewing this guy who was like the definition of badass, and he was like the most self-deprecating person I met. He's like, yeah, they dropped me behind the lines. Yeah, there was a couple of Germans there, and then I'm like, okay. And then it's like, and then I was in Paris. I'm like, no, let's go back to the German story. What happened then? he has the crazy ass Rambo story, and he's just like, yeah, it's just what it is. It's what?
Well, that's real hero stuff. That's real hero stuff. That's why that generation is the greatest generation. It's real hero stuff.
The World War II generation is incomparable to any other generation we have. Yeah. It really is
real hero stuff.
That's a fact, and that's the best way to summarize it. They're the ones that created the institutions and a lot of this innovation. So.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Just take a moment if you want to give any more shout outs for other people who can follow your work and keep up to date with what you're doing. The floor is yours.
So, just stay tuned for the next book, Nazis of Long Island, the plot against America. Nazis of Long Island, Sedition, Espionage, and the plot against America. That's dropping in April. And once again, you can feel free to share my email with anyone that's interested in general that has any questions they want to discuss further. So.
Brilliant. I love it. Thank you so much for your time today. And again, once the new book comes out, we'll have you back on and we'll get into all those rabbit holes. But this has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Thank you everybody for listening. And again, we'll catch you next time. I hope you enjoyed the content today. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. The end. With your host, James Oliva. Executive producers, Clint G and James Oliva. That's obnoxious. Sound design, mix, and master by James Oliva. Literally no one cares. For more Totally Legitimate Business, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Totally Legitimate Business or add us on TikTok at TLB Pod. When will this end? Thank you for listening. Now get back to work. Move it along, buddy.